We're heading up very quickly towards the end of the show. We all did it, didn't we? We came up with New Year's resolutions. We were adamant we were going to stick by them. And then we woke up the next morning on the 1st of January and we forgot what they actually were. So the secret to keeping a resolution simple is to break it down into something more manageable. But easier said than done, isn't it, Maya Fisher-French, financial columnist? We've already forgotten what we planned to do. We weren't going to use the no money we don't have on our credit cards. But here we are doing it again, paying for school fees and stationery. So how do we make it realistic for the year?
I think one of the things is that we have these big statements. I'm going to be debt-free. Rather than trying to do everything at once, is say, okay, I'm going to just take one debt. Maybe it's my smallest. Maybe it's that store card, and I'm going to pay it off by the end of this year. So make it small, manageable things that make you feel good because they're achievable. You've done something positive and it's achievable. You don't feel like at the end of the year, oh, I only paid off that, I didn't do anything about the rest of my debt. So I think you do need to be realistic. Another one, for example, people say, oh, I'm going to start accumulating wealth, I'm going to get rich, okay? But you know what? Just see what you can afford to invest every month, maybe even if it's just 200 Rand a month. The hardest part, let me tell you, of your New Year's resolution is opening the account. Because let me tell you, all the paperwork and FICA that you have to go through to open these investments, that's usually the hardest part. So it's just about really saying, okay, I'm going to just take the first step. Another one that I really like for people as a New Year's resolution is to start building that emergency fund. We've spoken about this before, how important that was with COVID, but people know they must have 3 to 6 months of their living expenses. That's a lot of money. So why don't you just start with accumulating 15,000 Rand. Say by the end of this year, I'll have 15,000 Rand in that account. So it's just about, for me, starting with just a little thing that you can achieve, and most likely you'll achieve it quite quickly. And maybe then, maybe in 3 or 4 months' time, you're feeling good about the achievement, you can move on to another resolution, maybe a mid-year resolution, and build it up from there.
I like that, a mid-year's resolution. I think we'll have that conversation later. I'm going to ask about your New Year's resolution in a moment, but before I do that, perhaps let me just put this to you as well, Maya. How do you stick with it? Because here's the problem with people who can't manage their money. And I used to be quite bad a couple of years ago. I like to think after you've yelled at me on air all these years, I've gotten better. I don't even have a credit card anymore. How do we avoid the temptation of spending the money that we're saving? Because the problem is, when you don't have a lot of money and you see some money, you want to spend the money. You know where I'm going with this.
That is very true, but I think first of all it is about being realistic. So, I've come across people who've said, I'm budgeting and I'm only going to spend 5,000 Rand a month on groceries, but I never stick to it. Well, maybe it's not possible. Maybe your original goal is unrealistic. So I think it's also about understanding, what is it really costing you to live? So if you had to say electricity, water, groceries, go and look at your statements and understand whether or not those New Year's resolutions or those goals are actually realistic, and maybe there's some bigger changes you need to be making. Maybe it is about saying, well, there's something else I'm going to have to give up, or I've got to try and find additional income. So I think from that perspective, make sure that your budget is realistic, but that your spending plan is realistic. And then it is about, for me, where I see a lot of mistakes people making are either that they don't go and look at some of their fixed expenses. Let me tell you, car insurance, household insurance, go review those every single year. You will be pocketing some extra money. Those sort of things we're overpaying for. And then it's the impulse buying. It's the unconscious buying. And that's actually, you mentioned my New Year's resolution, and that's actually been my New Year's resolution, and it's been working for 10 days, 11 days so far. It's been working really well. It's a spending diet. So I put myself on a spending diet. So no non-essentials, nothing. No clothes or shoes, and I've had to walk past all these sales in the shopping malls. 2 for 1, 50% off, last chance to buy. All those adverts on my website shouting out, discounts here, there, and everywhere. And it's actually very therapeutic, and I feel very much like I'm detoxing at the moment, away from that consumerism. And I think even if you're doing that, just say for 2 months, you say, right, I'm actually not, this is it. Because I think if you say I'm not going to do it for the whole year, again, we get fatigued. But you say, you know what, for the next 2 months, and I'll tell you just a very personal thing, I actually need a new pair of pajamas. I really do. But I'm not going to buy them till March. So you put you say it's tough. I'm going to make it. I'm going to do it through this. And I think, obviously it takes discipline. But if you've gone like I have and actually publicized this on eNCA and on social media, sometimes it's good. Get other people to hold you accountable. So there's no way, if somebody sees me swiping my credit card at a shopping mall now, they've seen me on TV, they're going to come and say, Maya, you're breaking it. So go and go and get some accountability from your friends as well.
All right, so if you see Maya Fisher-French walking around Cape Town with what looks like it could be a bag full of pajamas, go and grab her. We'll grab her and put her back on air with us. Maya, I think, just before I let us go for the moment, the 2-month plan seems to be a good thing, because I think people can't quite think that far ahead. I don't know if we've become a new ADD generation or something, but we can't quite do it. So I like the 2-month thing. Perhaps I'll let you go on this one. You're talking about saving, but also cutting back. Can we just talk about the cutting back quickly? When is it a good thing to start looking? You were talking about those fixed costs. When should someone start looking at, for example, maybe it's time to lose the overpriced car or the 5-bedroom house when there's only 2 of us living in it? When does someone start making those cost-cutting decisions?
It's such a good question, and funny enough, I actually had quite a few people contacting me recently. People get hold of you on social media, and I'm not allowed to give advice. So, but it is, people are saying, I've lost my job, should I give up my house? And I think a lot of it is about sitting down and saying, what is realistic? If do I need the house? Now, maybe the house is absolutely perfect for you. It's the right size, it meets your needs, and the cost of selling and buying again is, is significant. But if it's a longer term thing, you say, you know what, the kids have left home, or we bought something, it's not really working for us, and we would be making anyway a strategic longer-term decision, then that becomes a different conversation. And I think the overpriced car is the biggest problem. I see it over and over and over again. People don't pay attention to what they're signing up for. They sign up for a 5-6 year repayment period with balloon payments. They don't understand the running costs of the car. And I think that one does need to say, if you are actually going to struggle to keep those repayments and you're going to start lapsing them, then it is better to exit it sooner rather than later. And I do have to tell you now, I do have to admit that the banks tell me one thing and sometimes they do something completely different for customers, but they are saying that because they're seeing so many people in financial difficulty, generally speaking, if you've only had your car a year or 2, you owe more on it than it's worth. But do the numbers and say, well, even if I get rid of it and I take out, and I have a loan, I have to do a loan repayment to the bank, but I get a cheaper runaround that has less insurance, less petrol, the numbers can actually still work out in your favor. So you do need to run the numbers as well. And for some people, literally, it is about giving up the car and getting onto public transport if they can't afford it. But the last thing you want to do is to start defaulting. So I think the best thing you can do is, if you're struggling, is to speak to the bank, sit down and say, what are my options? It's when you start defaulting that you get into such a mess, and the banks lose trust in you. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of. So if the people go straight away to the bank and deal with it, they're getting a lot better deals. If they start missing payments, they're down 3-4 months of missed payments, the bank's saying, you've broken trust, we're not so keen. So that would probably be my biggest advice.
When it comes to banks and SARS, I'm afraid the ostrich head in the sand trick, I'm afraid, doesn't work. From a soon-to-be pajamaless Maya Fisher-French down in Cape Town, we're back with you again, I'm sure, next week as well. Always good to have Maya with us on the South African Morning. Let's